All right, we are live. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, East Coast. Good evening, Europe. And we always have a number of people joining from Asia and Australia. So thanks for staying up with us, for those brave souls. My name is Everett Wallace. I am CEO of Star Gaming Advisors, provides consulting and business development for content creators and creatives in the XR space. And I'm San Francisco chapter president for the VRARA Association, which is co-hosting this event along with Microsoft. So we created this series. This is the third event in a series. I think many of you have joined for the first two. It was in part inspired by a quote, which was appropriately from Bill Gates. He said a few months into the pandemic, at least 10 years of progress in forcing people to do things in a digital way will happen in a 2-year period. So this really is a moment in time of digital acceleration. I think many people believe XR is going to play a large role in that digital acceleration. And in retrospect, we may look back at these 2 years and it could be the watershed moment for XR. So to do justice to this moment, Microsoft and myself and the association essentially wanted to bring together leaders from different industries within XR, importantly with different perspectives and backgrounds in those verticals as well, and then do two things. The first is just talk to them about what they're working on. So what is the state of their work in 2020? What are their problems? What is the product? What are they researching? Dig in a little bit on individual case studies. And then the second is to provide real thought leadership. So a platform for these different leaders from different backgrounds to be greater than the sum of their parts and to talk about the bigger questions. So what is the state right now of XR in their industry? What will the legacy be for these years? And most importantly, where are we headed? Realistically speaking, what is it going to look like in 5 years and in 10 years? And will XR be as transformative as many people believe that it will be? So let's get going. We've got a killer lineup. I'm really excited about this one. A couple of housekeeping items first. So I am the San Francisco chapter president for the association. Briefly, the association is the largest trade association in the world for XR, pretty much by any metric. And its mission, as I see it, is very simple. It is to bring people together, to educate themselves, to network, to hire, whatever it may be, to sell their products. So it shrinks the industry. I've been, the president since early 2020. I've really enjoyed the community. There's a lot of ways to benefit from it. So if you're interested in joining, shoot me an email. I've got my email at the bottom of this screen. It's a good fit for a lot of people. The other thing I should mention is the education forum we have upcoming. So that's in April. The date hasn't been finalized yet, but it's essentially a one-day long conference. I think you can put up the slide now, Dan. So look for that on your calendars. Here we go. Here, it's essentially, the best we can do when you can't do face-to-face events. So I imagine a lot of the speakers today will also be at this. So look out for that. And then finally, looking ahead to our other events. So this is our third event. We have two more scheduled right now. One of them is immersive entertainment and storytelling. That's for February. I'm very excited about that one. I have a gaming background, and a lot of the folks who are leading content creation and entertainment in XR are coming from gaming. So I think that's going to be a great one. In March, we've got more a networking focused one. We're going to have the option to log in with VR on that, so it'll be fun. We'll have a keynote. We're going to bring back a lot of the speakers, and there may be more announced as well. All right, from there, let me throw it over to my wonderful co-host, Joe Ryall at Microsoft.
Hi guys, sorry, I just had my head scratching my cat scratching my head. Firstly, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us across the world, late nights, early mornings to attend this. We're delighted to have you, and it means a lot to us. I think when I first had the discussion with Everett, we were planning on one event and then decided, oh, wow, the whole industry is impacted by 2020. Now we're in 2021 and things are looking a little bit better for us. So I'm delighted by that, and I hope that you and your families are all safe and that we continue to just get out of this terrible situation. The event is pretty amazing. This is me on my treadmill because it was like I just what happens in winter? I need to exercise. I'm British, as you can probably hear, but I've been living in California for 16 years and I love it here. I love America. I love Americans. I married one, and I love HoloLens. You should check out HoloLens too if you can. If we were allowed to do physical events, we would definitely be able to bring you in and give you a demo. Unfortunately, not right now. But there are some other things that you can get involved in. So we have a meetup, and that's very social. It's less about educational. It's more about talking about your projects, because Microsoft want to hear about them, and we've got a wonderful engineer, Nick Klingensmith, who hosts those. So if you go to aka.ms/MR meetup, you can sign up. And if you sign up to that group as well, you'll also get all the pings about the educational series, the MR speaker series, where we do educational things, as well as third-party events that we're collaborating with the VRARA Association. And then if you want to have a bit more information and get a lot more inclusive and close to us, there is aka.ms/I1MR. That is our partner program. We do ask for a bit more information, but we don't spam. We just give you some information like newsletters, tell you about events, tell you about product releases, and any kind of major announcements. And you're basically the first to get it. And then finally, if you just want to have chit chat, we've got the aka.ms/MR forum, /MR forum. And that again is Nick Klingensmith, very talented engineer that will be talking to you, but we have a ton of cloud advocates and people that can help. I don't want to talk for too long because we've got such amazing speakers and we've got an incredible lineup this time. So I'm going to hand it back to Everett and thank my colleague Dan Escudero, who's also a co-host. He's in the background, but doing a lot of hard work for me. So thank you, Dan, and then over to Everett.
Thanks, Joe. All right, so first on the agenda, where it wouldn't be a live event if something didn't go wrong, was going to be Dan Ayoub, who's the GM of education at Microsoft. He leads all of their efforts on mixed reality in education. Unfortunately, a tree went on his power lines about 10 minutes ago. So he's not going to be able to open. We're hoping he's going to get power in the next 30-45 minutes. So hopefully he'll be able to join and we'll do his segment later on. Fingers crossed. So instead, we're going to jump to the second segment, Daniel Guenther. So Daniel Guenther is the lead of extended reality at Accenture. He leads global efforts for Accenture, leveraging XR both internally and for their clients. So Dan has a really interesting perspective, I think, because obviously he's part of this enormous organization, which is arguably the leader in consulting when it comes to innovation and digital products and IT. But I think he also has the temperature of, the Fortune 500 companies that Accenture works with. What is their real attitude towards XR right now? Are they actually, putting dollars towards it? What is the actual temperature of the market? So Dan, thanks so much for being with us. Over to you.
Thanks for having me, Everett. Super excited to be here. As Everett said, I lead Accenture's XR business. Accenture overall has over 500,000 employees. We've got over 300 that are full-time professionals focused on XR in more than 30 locations around the globe. At Accenture, we believe our purpose is to deliver on the promise of technology and human ingenuity. And I don't think there's a better use case or learning series to explore that intersection than what we're going to be talking about today in learning, education, and collaboration. I'm excited to have the opportunity to share not only some of the work that we're doing with our clients, but also how Accenture ourselves have embraced XR to change the way that we work and collaborate with our people. 2020, as we all have experienced, has been a year full of immense challenges. But it's also been an opportunity to embed new ways of working fueled by technologies like extended reality. And it's clear from my point of view that 2020 has accelerated that investment. Starting on the left, the first thing that many deployed and many of our customers deployed was connecting with remote experts using AR glasses. Not only did we help our clients do this, but Accenture embedded this into the way we do business. Our Accenture security practice performs facility walkthroughs for many of our customers to help them identify and resolve both physical and cybersecurity threats. And the pandemic and the ability to limit travel greatly impacted how we do that. So deploying AR glasses allowed us to help many of our clients continue to make sure that their facilities were safe. The second thing, which we're very proud about, is how we've helped augment workers during this time. Our team in Monterrey, Mexico, helped enable the very first HoloLens AR surgery in Latin America back in February. Through the use of AR glasses, surgeons able to overlay 3D models from CT scans and MRIs during their procedure, maximizing their ability to choose the best points of entry and procedural techniques that reduce recovery time and improve patient outcomes. Thirdly, we've been very busy in deploying enterprise virtual reality training. We partnered with the Institute of Veterans and Military Families to build interactive VR training for veterans who are leaving the service and returning into civilian life. Through this training, they're able to practice how they interview for corporate jobs and make their military experience effectively communicate how it translates to the corporate world. But what I'm most excited to talk about today is what we call enterprise collaboration. And I'm going to walk you through how Accenture's been embedding XR collaboration into our projects and client work, and how we continue to innovate around how this technology is going to make an impact to how we all collaborate in the future. When we talk about extended reality collaboration for the enterprise, what we talk about is how this technology can bring our people together independent of geography and be creative and solve problems feeling like we're together. With a workforce of over 500,000 people, continually improving how we collaborate is essential and core to our DNA. 82% of companies have announced that post-pandemic, they will let their employees work remotely at least some of the time. Many have announced their employees may never come back to the office. Employees who work remotely 100% of the time are among the least engaged of employees. We can see this in many of our people and coworkers today. Being on Teams and Zoom calls all day long, working from inside your bedroom, your basement, places that aren't designed to facilitate for you to be the most productive that you can be very disengaging. A highly engaged workforce increases innovation, productivity, and bottom line performance. So the results can be substantial if you can figure out how to make remote employees engaged and feel present and tied into the company. I want to welcome you to the south of France and Accenture's Sophia Antipolis R&D Lab, which is powered by our immersive collaboration platform. Accenture leaned in hard during the pandemic for how to leverage and further develop our collaboration platform. We have a network of many world-class R&D facilities spread throughout the world. We use these R&D facilities to help our clients innovate as part of workshops to inspire and explain how technology is changing the way that they can do business. With the pandemic, we could no longer bring our clients into our facilities as part of these workshops. However, using XR, we can now schedule public and private meetings that are very high fidelity and leverage spatial audio that allows us to bring our clients in and bring these facilities to life. Our platform works across a variety of devices and has been deployed and used in over 35 different client sessions. In fact, one major movie and entertainment studio is currently working with us now to deploy this as part of how they do business. So we've been very excited by the possibilities that we've seen internally and that our clients who've experienced the platform has seen as well. Oops. The next topic I want to talk about is what we call the nth floor. In partnership with Microsoft and Allspace, this nth floor concept is a riff off of the physical office buildings we have. In many of our office buildings, we have multiple floors, and we might decide to meet on floor 44 or floor 46. The nth floor is the floor that sits above our physical office space that our globally geographic diverse workforce all have access to. From this office space, they can access a variety of digital worlds built for our business. We have places that can be very serious. This is Accenture San Francisco Innovation Hub. This multi-floor facility is a digital twin of our innovation hub in San Francisco. It's multi-purpose. We use this for campus recruiting events, employee onboarding, technology showcases, and ad hoc training and networking across our employees. We brought hundreds of people together into our platform to network and to learn about Accenture and what it would be like to work here. Additionally, it was clear that with the exhaustion of our teams, we needed events that were engaging and beyond Zoom and Teams happy hours. If I never have to have another Zoom wine tasting in my life, I will be just fine. These events and this holiday party speakeasy are fun ways that we can bring our teams together inside of VR to socialize and get to know each other outside of what feels like a work environment. We've seen so much success internally with this. We now offer this to many of our clients as a way that they can bring their people together in a way that's more engaging and work on team morale issues throughout 2021. That's evolved into the next step to places that feel magical and delightful and not tied like the real world. Welcome to our Winter Wonderland Retreat. The Winter Wonderland Retreat has a variety of activities designed to get teams talking, to get them networking and learning about each other. We know that many of the ad hoc conversations we all have and mentoring opportunities is what leads to career development. You can sit by the fire and roast marshmallows. We have a large karaoke stage where teams can get together and sing karaoke. And we have areas specifically designed for fun snowball fights. We'll be hosting a party of over 60 people from one of our recent acquisitions in the security space, where they'll all be enabled with Oculus Quests and getting together and have fun and celebrate the successes that they had in 2020. At the same time, we partnered with the Schema School of Business in Europe. The Schema School of Business is one of the top-rated business schools in Europe, and we're piloting how XR can create a more powerful and engaging student learning experience. As they work to reinvent how they bring people together into lecture halls and break them out into many of the breakouts that are so essential for discussions, they're experimenting and learning on what the future of learning in classrooms could look like. We expect this will continue to evolve into more purpose-built environments in the future. So we continue to innovate and push the waters a lot within our business and with our clients on how XR technologies can bring people together to collaborate. We've learned a lot. The ecosystem continues to need to reduce friction, especially for our new users. Many first-time users get overwhelmed with the idea of creating a virtual avatar. How should one represent themselves in the digital world? And how can that be made easier and feel less overloading to them? It's important that we continue to support a variety of devices across a variety of manufacturers. An open ecosystem will be key for how people can collaborate in the future. And experiences need to have high fidelity and quality in order for people to be engaged. We know that platforms will need to solve for the combination of in-person, virtual, and immersive workspaces. When many of us do start to return to offices, how will we engage with people that are at home and bring them together so that we can feel that we blend this digital and physical world and that we don't all have to be in the same channel at the same time? We expect that workflows and workspaces will expand from multi-purpose to fit for purpose. The San Francisco Innovation Hub is a great example of a physical office space that's multi-purpose. It's designed to involve a large variety of enterprise activities. At the same time, many of those activities aren't ideally done inside of the office. We have a world that we built for accelerated design thinking. If we were to get together and brainstorm, would we really choose an office full of whiteboards? You know, we've been testing out what that experience might feel like in the valley of the Swiss Alps, where we could have different pods and designations for each of the teams to break out and come back together. And we think that evolution will continue in these fit for purpose workspaces and evolve into business applications and workflows. There's a lot of utility in command centers and control towers and how we bring people together to perform their daily jobs and drive the business, as opposed to just meeting in VR. So we're super excited about the future of collaboration and how these technologies have not only made an impact in 2020, but the future that we see moving into 2021. So I thank you, and I hope that a little glimpse into what Accenture's been doing has been interesting and insightful as you think about how you can deploy these technologies in your businesses and your companies. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Everett. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Really interesting work. Next up, we have Dr. Claudia Krebs. So Dr. Krebs uses cutting-edge technology such as XR to prospect a new frontier, the human brain. She is a leading researcher and a professor of teaching at the University of British Columbia. Dr. Krebs teaches both gross anatomy and neuroanatomy for a broad range of students. So she has this really wonderful perspective of both from a medical perspective and her research, why is XR fundamentally better, but also the boots on the ground reality of trying to get it working with students right now. So I think she can speak to both. On to you, Claudia. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much, Everett. It's a pleasure to be here with you. What a year it has been, right? So we were catapulted into an online world at the middle of March, and we had to adapt very quickly. We had one weekend to move the entire UBC curriculum online in March, and then we had the summer to plan for the fall. And it's really interesting because I've been working with XR for a number of years. And the acceleration that we were talking about earlier, how what would have taken 10 years, will now be achieved within 2 years. I think we've achieved much of that in 2 months within 2020, right? That transition was so rapid, and we had to embrace these technologies very, very quickly. I'm going to quickly share a couple of slides with you to show what we've been working on here. There we go. Okay, so this is our sort of anatomy education journey in XR. And I like starting with an innovator, Thomas Edison, who had an invention lab and an innovation lab. And one of the things that he invented was the motion picture camera. And sorry, that's really interesting because this was the beginning of us as humans to start experiencing the world in 2D. So once we started really embracing the motion picture, embracing camera technology, we started capturing memories and photos, and we started experiencing stories that were told to us on screen. And I think that changed the way we see the world, and it changed the way we teach. And in fact, this is a quote by Thomas Edison. Books will soon be obsolete in public schools. Scholars will be instructed through the eye. It is possible to teach every branch of human knowledge with the motion picture. Our school system will be completely changed inside of 10 years. Now, of course, he was wrong. We still have books, we still embrace books, but everybody who went through a school system learned a lot of science through Bill Nye the Science Guy. It was the best day when the TV was being rolled into the classroom, and you would learn science with Bill Nye. Of course, the school system didn't change completely within 10 years. And just like this pandemic maybe catapulted us forward rapidly, a lot of things won't change and haven't changed. And it's interesting because we saw this really rapid acceleration, And now we're asking the students, so how was it? And their response by and large is, we realized that we had to do it, but reality beats extended reality. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. And this quote for me, it's a little bit of a warning, a little bit of that irrational exuberance, right? Like our technology is going to be able to solve all problems in the world. And that's not true. Humans still prefer reality. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind, especially as we design these extended reality environments, to make them in a way that we leverage the affordances of this technology to make it different and not just a replica possibly of reality. But let's go back to what happened to us as we were transitioning from living in the world to experiencing a lot of the world through 2D technology. And so when we look at our brains, we are very, very visual creatures. A lot of our memories are encoded visually. A lot of us think visually, and then some of us do not think in pictures. But what has happened is that when we experience the world in 2D through a screen, we have a reduction in visual cues. There's an increased ambiguity, and it takes the higher mental effort to navigate that world. Because we naturally perceive our world in 2D. And so when we are experiencing three-dimensional objects through a two-dimensional screen, it's still not fully three-dimensional. I kind of call it 2.5D, right? So when you're entering a virtual world through a web screen. It's different, of course, in fully immersive environments, as in full VR or AR. So when we were trying to create an app on neuroanatomy, how to teach the structures on the inside of the brain, what we wanted to do was really recreate the brain and be able to look at it in 3D. So this is our HoloBrain app here, where we recreated the structures. You can freely rotate this brain. You can look at it from all angles. And then we put up screens in our virtual space so that you could look at the cross-sectional anatomy and then correlate the cross-sectional anatomy with the three-dimensional anatomy, really with the goal of making this more intuitive to understand. And so when we did this, we studied it. We wanted to see what is the impact of this. And something really interesting came out of two studies that we did. And sort of when we distill it down, like what was the take-home message in those two studies? It was when we have 5 people, a group of 5 people with an instructor, all with HoloLenses, interacting with the same HoloBrain, the students who learned in that way had better learning outcomes because the instructor was showing them and really making that three-dimensional object come to life in their actual space. When we did a similar study with students alone with the HoloLens and kind of using it as a self-learning device, they didn't learn better than people who learned with a plastic model, even though we had all that interactivity and all of those things, to help them navigate that. And I think it really points to a couple of things. One, the critical role that the instructor plays in making things come to life, and sort of the barrier that still exists with the technology, having to figure out how to navigate things on your own and making things sort of come to life there. The other thing that we found was that when we looked at the group learning, where we had 5 HoloLenses sort of all looking at the same object, the students who had difficulty with three-dimensional mental rotation, they did fine. It had no effect on their learning. Whereas when you're on your own and you have difficulty with three-dimensional mental rotation, that really hindered your learning with this technology. So these are all things that we need to keep in mind as students and people come in with different affordances, like they come in with difficulty in three-dimensional mental rotation, and we need to be able to design interfaces and experiences for them to help them overcome that. When our big fat red coronavirus here hit, we had to move all of our learning online. And the question was, can we simulate a gross anatomy or a neuroanatomy lab? Can we make that come to life in a way that makes sense to people? And so we worked really hard to make a couple of things come together. One was sort of a 3D scan of brains that we put together. And I don't know, this video clip is showing parts that are not part of the, but you can see sort of our process, I guess, a little bit there. So we would 3D scan objects, and we did photogrammetry as well. We then created this virtual anatomy lab here, which we created in Unity. And so students would enter the lab and they would come to a stainless steel tray here. There's a shelf that they can open, and then they can choose the specimens that they want to study for that day. And so here's a little video clip of one of those specimens, what they would look like. And again, we're looking at not just a clip, but my entire process here. And so you can see there's labels on there, and you can rotate this. So this is a human brain that was 3D scanned, and that we can now look at in 3D. And the students can manipulate these brains and look at them. They can fly around them inside of the app to look at various brain regions. So our big goal in all of this is to design full learning ecosystems where we have online materials both in 2D and in 3D, to have fully immersive experiences there that combine with in-class experiences where we have either the face-to-face learning that we're looking forward to coming back to. And when I look at these photos now, I want to yell at them, please, socially distance, wear your masks. You can't be this close to each other. But of course, these are pictures from our pre-COVID days. So when we're back in the classroom, to really integrate that with the online materials that we've created, and that in turn integrates with workplace experiences. And all of that really for a lifelong learning experience, because the learning never stops. And to have an online repository and resources that are constantly updating is really important for that kind of immersive experience there. When we're designing these things, we really want to make sure that we put a lot of focus, not just on the content, but also on the UI and the UX. We're trying to really take the best practices from software development to make sure that our processes are effective, that we're doing constant user feedback to optimize the learning experience for our students. We're also really keen on respecting universal design principles, so adding different ways to experience these apps so that it's accessible to all learners. And so with that, I really want to thank the team behind this. My team is the Hive at UBC. It's the hack space for innovation and visualization in education. It's within the Faculty of Medicine. Our biggest partner in the university is the UBC Emerging Media Lab, and many of the things we create, we do in collaboration with the Center for Digital Media here in Vancouver. It's an exciting journey to be on. It's really interesting to be at that cusp of trying to understand how these technologies influence our learning and how our brain starts processing these environments and then creating environments that suit our brains and our learning needs. Thank you very much. And with that, Everett, I guess I'll turn it back to you.
Over to me. Thank you, Claudia. That was wonderful. Next up, we have Bharani Rajakumar, who is founder and CEO of TRANSFR. He is on a mission, and his company is on a mission to create alternative pathways to career success through intuitive learning methods so more people can succeed and be upwardly mobile. His company has partnered with Brightline Defense, where Eddie On is the executive director. So they're going to be talking together about their work together. So Eddie and Bharani, you can go ahead and put your webcams live, and over to you.
Thanks, Everett. All right. Hey, Eddie. Good to see you. Thanks everyone for making the time to hear what we have to say today. Like Everett mentioned, my name is Bharani Rajakumar. I'm the CEO and founder of TRANSFR Inc. And got a few minutes here, so I wanted to bring in one of our favorite partners, Eddie on. Eddie, before we jump into a little bit of Q&A, why don't you just share a little bit about your background and Brightline?
Sure. So Brightline is an environmental justice organization. We're a 501c3 nonprofit based in San Francisco, and historically we worked in a lot of hyper-local environmental justice-oriented campaigns. Myself, by training, I'm a lawyer by background, and a lot of what I do as the executive director of Brightline is just making sure our community coalitions are managed in partnership with either public sector stakeholders like government agencies or private sector stakeholders like TRANSFR VR.
Cool. And so the reason I thought it'd be a good idea to bring Eddie on with me is because I thought Brightline had a really powerful story. So VR, as you guys know, is it's rapidly gaining momentum in part because of COVID for sure. But the use case that Brightline had was really interesting. So, gaming and other areas have been a really big industry. We focus on what we like to call, VR for good. And so Eddie's kind of story and Brightline's story kind of captures that. So, Eddie, can you share a little bit about how you guys are using VR with the students that you work with to achieve the mission?
Sure. So Brightline runs both policy advocacy campaigns as well as program work. And typically our programs range from air quality monitoring to job training. And a lot of our work in job training actually has to do with construction and making sure that at-risk youth who are not necessarily college bound can have access to career pathways right after, say, high school. So the age that we work with is typically 18 through 21. It's in the nonprofit sphere called the transitional age youth. And a lot of our work is actually called workforce development, which refers to usually job training and job placement. And construction is one of the few industries left generally in the United States where if you are able to gain access to a long-term apprenticeship and journey level trade, then you can have access to good middle class wages, which is a lot of what our work around breaking the cycle of poverty is about. And so for this particular program that we run, it's called the Construction Bridge Program. Historically, it's been a 5-week hands-on training program where we work with youth in usually classes of 15 to 30 students and help them build, anything from toolboxes to construction signs. And part of the point of that is to get students acclimated to just even the ability to working with tools, understanding the field of construction and the industry and the pathways it provides. And ultimately, we connect those students to a longer-term training pathway known as City Build Academy, which is a government agency based in San Francisco that churns out it's a pre-apprenticeship program, so their focus is churning out apprentice-ready job trainees, and they are then set for a 20-30 year career in construction as a theory.
That's really interesting, Eddie. I think a lot of people might be critical when kind of thinking about the government as an innovator or an early adopter of technology. And here you were saying you've figured out a way to kind of partner with existing agencies and finding a new pathway to help people or help young people, help youth get on a career pathway. What would happen to these youth if they didn't have this opportunity? What typically happens to your target population, and why is this important? Like, why did you choose to spend your time doing this as opposed to anything else you could have done?
So I'll tackle it maybe at the system level view and more of a personal standpoint. The system level view is really trying to figure out where folks end up going. I think historically over the last few decades, there's been a trend to just focus people on college, graduate schools. It's almost like an educational arms race that has happened amongst credentials and trying to get people on some kind of white-collar career pathway, which isn't the case for quite a few graduates coming out of high school. I mean, historically, there used to be things like woodshop, and nowadays in school districts, you're starting to see switch back in the other direction. And part of this is just trying to think through, just careers that can be sustainable over a period of time. So even during the pandemic, for instance, there's a lot of talk about an infrastructure bill. And there is, of course, a private development sphere, but a lot of the infrastructure that's being proposed needs to be backed by government dollars at the end of the day. And a lot of the infrastructure that we rely on our day-to-day lives, whether it's, say, the highway system that exists or the road infrastructure that exists to the very buildings that we often live and work in, a lot of that is backed by financing and direct subsidies by the government. So just trying to think through thoughtfully that combination of private sector innovation and government involvement, and then the nonprofit sphere hopefully can help bridge some of the gaps in community outreach and education and preparation. A lot of work goes into this. So working with TRANSFR VR, it's been really fun to acclimate high school students who are primarily Black Latinx students coming from different neighborhoods of the city, but primarily the southeast sector of the city, which has historically been a very segregated part of San Francisco, has been personally important to me to do, as it's not typical legal work, but it is something that gives me a lot of heart and makes me happy about what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I think during the pandemic, what we've done is now plug students into a different type of training. It's not the typical hands-on training of building a toolbox with one's hands. It's really using Oculus 2 headsets, hardware, and then using TRANSFR VR software license, which is a gamified construction job training app, and then making sure that the students have access to it. And Bharani, maybe you can probably better explain the TRANSFR VR training app than I can, but having played it myself personally, it's been very engaging to play. And for me, again, like I come from a kind of dry legal background, so it's been fun to get involved in this kind of sphere in a very different way. But Bharani, yeah, maybe did you want to describe the training app itself and some of the different module or the different courses involved in the app?
Sure, I'll say one sentence on it, and then I think we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you one more question that I think will be relevant to the audience. So, like Eddie said, we created these training simulations, and we didn't intentionally create them as a game. We work with employers to make sure that whatever training is included is modeled after what they will be expected to do in the real world. As a previous guest said, reality is better than extended reality. And so employers feel the same way. I mean, who cares if you can do it in VR if you can't do it in real life? And so that's what we try to do, is we try to model actual job scenarios that you'll be asked to do on the job interview. And so we're really excited to work with Eddie to give young students and the younger generation workforce an opportunity to practice these skills, master them, go to a job interview, and then get the job. As an early adopter, do you see this as something as a fad, or is this something that you think you will expand and will kind of continue to grow in the future?
I definitely see it as something to grow and scale up in the future. And maybe as a closing thought, I'll share the photo from our actual training, which was outdoors. Is that visible right now? So
sure is, yeah.
As you can see, this is in a park in the southeast sector of San Francisco, also known as Bayview Hunters Point. The park itself is India Basin Shoreline Park. But you can see Daniela Cortez, our program coordinator, in the background, moving from student to student. I think it's really twofold. One, there are skill sets, hard skill sets gained from this VR training. And that's been really useful for the students to be able to do things like identify tools appropriately, know construction safety hazard that will be on a work site. But also, secondly, it's just even acclimating students who would not normally have access to this tech through this VR training has been really valuable unto itself. And these are like longer term pictures I think about personally, and the organization Brightline thinks about, which is how to increase diversity in tech. And I think with diversity in tech, you'll get more creative uses, more creative applications, and hopefully a larger general usage and appreciation for the field. And so I do envision this being an integral part of our curriculum and hope to really build on it in the future.
Cool. Thanks, Eddie. Thanks for coming on and sharing your time.
Thanks for having me, Bharani, and thanks again.
All right. All right. Thank you, guys. What a great use case for XR. Next up, our final segment before the panel, we have Jacob Lowenstein. He is the VP of Business Development and Strategy at Spatial, a company on a mission to empower people to be more connected, creative, and productive through Spatial's AR-first collaboration tool. So Jacob, you can go ahead and put your webcam live. I can say from personal experience, it's a very impressive product. So I'm excited about this talk. So hi.
Great to be here, man.
Glad you're here. Why don't you start just in a sentence for people who aren't familiar with Spatial? What is the product?
Sure. Spatial is kind of like if Zoom and Slack had an AR VR baby, right? So essentially what you're doing is you're able to meet with people from anywhere in the world as if you are standing across from or next to each other. And so it's kind of beautiful. You create a lifelike avatar from a single photo using machine learning, and then we turn that into a lifelike actual version of you. You basically turn your whole room into your monitor so you can upload any 2D or 3D content. We integrate with all your favorite tools, right? So you can upload content from your Google Drive, your Slack, your Figma, your Microsoft 365 accounts. It's all really tightly connected. You can share your screens into Spatial and work on giant screens all right there in front of you. And we're super multi-platform, right? So not only do we work on VR headsets like the Quest, we work in AR on headsets like the HoloLens 2 or the Magic Leap, and we also work not even on headset, right? You can join us just from your web browser or use our iOS or Android versions as well, which is super exciting.
Yeah, it's a very immersive experience. Having experienced all of them, it's quite impressive. So what I'm hoping to do is dig in a little bit of the story of Spatial in 2020, because you guys have a really incredible experience. You've had this huge user growth. You know, the whole world had a work from home experiment. You just raised the Series A, I believe, in early 2020. It's quite a story. So maybe take us back before the pandemic hit. Kind of where was the company? What was it trying to do? And then in those, let's say, first 6 months, give us a little behind the scenes. What was it like responding to this growth? And what did you learn as a company?
Yeah, so I mean, if people, you know, recall, and maybe I can share my screen a little bit just to give a sense of, you know, kind of the deal. But basically, like, if people recall, right, where they've maybe seen us before, you know, we've been on stage with Satya Nadella twice. So before 2020, we were really focused on big enterprises, and we were really focused on augmented reality. Right, so people might recognize, and can you still see my shared screen, or is it not?
We've got the screen, but it's frozen.
Oh, weird. Anyway, so we were very focused on augmented reality, and you know, here I'll play this video as well. So things like the Nreal, which was coming out, right? Like we were really focused on how do you bring digital information into the real world, and because of that, we were also primarily focused on enterprises, right? At the time, you know, all you really had was like the HoloLens 2. It was, you know, a device, an amazing device, but a device that that generally most folks, you know, most everyday people wouldn't necessarily be able to afford. And so we were focused on selling into really big companies. And so, you know, in 2019, we announced, we came out of stealth at the very end of 2018, and we announced our first customer was Mattel, working on this type of design collaboration that they were doing. And we proceeded to close, you know, a bunch of really amazing enterprise customers. These are customers like, you know, Pfizer, BNP Paribas, Ford, you know, Deutsche Telekom, just like a real cream of the crop of enterprise customers who are all sorting through the same problem, which is, how do you connect different offices around the world? So this is pre-COVID, right? Remote work is kind of this emerging trend. It's not the prevailing way that people work. So we're still thinking a lot about the office. And in this case, it was about big companies that were really distributed around the world that were looking to solve the problem of, you know, basically business travel. People were super exhausted from business travel. It was expensive, it's wasteful, it's bad for the environment. And, you know, to some extent, people were trying to solve, you know, this problem, which I kind of like to call, I mean, it's been talked about a lot, but this is the like, man, video chat, you know, is bad in certain ways. No one's paying attention. You know, Cole is literally looking down at his phone. People in the conference room aren't paying attention to anyone else. And that was really all people had pre-pandemic. And that was basically us going into 2020. And we thought, you know, this was going to be the year of augmented reality. We had Nreal coming out. It was a cheaper AR device. And what happened? MWC got canceled. That was pretty unexpected. Then the whole supply chain for making devices got really disrupted by COVID, right? Because of the shutdown in China. And what started to happen, and it was super interesting, was that we started to notice something, right? Like we started to notice that essentially we were seeing this really big uptick on our website. At that time, you could only get Spatial by going through us. You could only get Spatial by coming to our website, requesting an account, getting approved, and it was very straightforward like that. And then what we began to notice was this crazy uptick. Our traffic to our website was going crazy. The requests for accounts was going out of control. And it was really after we spoke to Facebook that we realized we totally had to pivot our strategy. We talked to Facebook, and, you know, Facebook said to us, you know, hey, you really need to look at the Quest. You know, our perspective until that point had been, Quest is really great. We're not sure how many have been bought, and we don't really know if there's like a bottoms up market here of consumers and small and medium businesses that have this device. And we were very, very focused only on AR. And what we learned, you know, from Facebook was like, man, people are buying the Quest like crazy. And so we agreed to, you know, basically with Facebook, we agreed to a partnership. We were going to bring Spatial to become the first non-gaming app to Quest to actually be available publicly in the Quest store. And so we, that was coupled with this crazy increase in demand, right? And we couldn't, you know, sort of handhold and deal with every single customer on an individual basis anymore. So we also said, okay, this has to be bottoms up and freemium because we just don't have the resources to talk to every customer. And so this all came together to form the plan. What was the plan? Well, the plan was we're going to basically put out Spatial for free. Anyone can get an account on our website. Anyone can download it, and it's going to be available to the world. And so we worked on that. We launched a beta to kind of much public recognition, and that was the beta came out in like April, May, got a ton of really, really nice press coverage, and then continued to work basically through that until September when we finally launched in the Quest store. And then, of course, the big coming out party was the launch of the Quest 2 when we were on the cover of the Wall Street Journal with Joanna Stern and showed off how with lifelike avatars, people could meet cross-platform from around the world. And basically, from the beginning of 2020 until now, with this pivot towards a bottoms-up strategy, we've seen basically 130x user growth. I mean, people are meeting in Spatial for thousands and thousands of hours. Our super users are basically meeting for like half a day at a time in Spatial, which is pretty wild. So the whole thing is basically flipped upside down, like the world turned upside down, quoting Hamilton, right? Like we thought we were this AR focused big enterprise company, and it turns out we're this pretty widely adopted bottoms up company that works in both VR, AR, web, and mobile as well.
Yeah, it's quite a story. Well, gosh, I've got a bunch of questions to ask you, but I think we only have time for one more, and it's a good lead into the panel. You've got all this momentum. You've kind of reshaped the company focus completely. What's next? What's in 2021? What's the big focus?
I love it. So, someone once told me it's better to show, not tell. So I want to talk, I'm going to show and not tell. So basically, firstly, right at the end of last year, not only did we release our mobile app, which I talked about, we released this experimental app called Telly. So check this out. So I want to talk about Telly for a second. So what Telly is, right, is it's two things happening at once. One is it's an unprecedented level of presence. So we basically found that by using the front-facing depth sensor on your iPhone, we can stream a full 3D mesh of your face and live broadcast it onto avatars. So, our current avatars are super realistic, but the face doesn't move, right? Like, we're not getting live signal of your face. Now we can do that using a device as simple as your iPhone to broadcast it onto your face. The second thing with Telly is it's literally just like FaceTime. So you call people and you're in Spatial. And I would say that that really defines the approach we're taking this year, which is insane accessibility, right? So just like Telly, Spatial is going to be an app that's insanely easy to jump into without any friction. So we're taking time to get into Spatial down to basically 0, and we're taking our presence totally to the next level, where you'll have avatars that are really animated in real time and really look like that. And then the second thing, which, because I'm basically out of time, I won't really super go into, is we're also going to be focusing more on what we call the hollow office. And what we say by the hollow office is, what we mean is, right now we're talking about virtual meetings. By the end of 2021, I want to be known as like the anti-meeting company, right? And so what that means is basically imagine working all day in Spatial or for long periods of time. And not only do you have your coworkers sort of feeling like they're beside you, right? And this is all real, so it's not a meeting app. You feel like you're literally in the office where your coworkers are with you all day, and you could basically have your information that you're working on persist for you all day. You can share your monitors with different employees that are floating around the space with you. And it feels like even though people are working from all these different places in the world, they all feel ambiently like they're together all day. So we talk about, 2021 not only as the year of accessibility, but as the year of the hollow office as well. And we're super excited to bring that to you this year.
That's great. I'm super excited to try it when it's live. All right, let's jump to the panel. We're going right on time. Dan Ayoub unfortunately has not recovered from the electricity outage, so I'm going to take over the role of moderator for everybody because I don't want to take up anyone's speaker time. So all of our speakers, go ahead, put your webcams on, put your audio on, and we've got about a half hour here to dig into some things. So I thought I would start with Dr. Krebs. Claudia, you had a great quote, which is you put the product in front of your students and they said reality beats extended reality. And I think one of the key things that is a reality right now is that the tech is early, and oftentimes when reality is going to beat extended reality is when it comes down to the social aspect. So many of what the applications that everyone here is working on, they are social, whether it's an educator talking to a student or collaboration. Social is really key. So when it comes to the serendipity of trying to replicate the reality of people around a table or an educator talking to a student, how close do you think we're going to get? Do you think we're going to be able to reach that point? And also, do you agree with that supposition that social is one of the most important things? So, Claudia, maybe start with you. Do you think we're going to get there?
Yes, I think we're going to get there. And yes, I think social is the biggest part of it. I mean, think back when the first smartphone came out, right? After then, we didn't have messaging and the internet in our hands at all times, and now we can't even imagine a world without it. My 80-year-old father now has a smartphone, right, and is learning to interact with everyone through that. And so as these technologies become more and more intuitive and accessible for people, the barrier of having to interact with the technology goes down, and it just becomes a natural extension. I think the way we use our smartphones now is a natural extension of our normal interactions. And I think the XR space is moving into that. Right now we have barriers in place. We need powerful computers in order to interact in the XR space. Not everybody has access to that yet. That's a sort of tech development and hardware acceleration that we're currently in, right? That is going to remove those barriers. The one barrier that we really need to overcome with smart UI and UX design is the individual's capability to navigate the three-dimensional space seamlessly. And not all of us have bring the same intuitive ability to that. And so that's something that I think as we're designing the spaces, we really need to be mindful of. The biggest thing that we've lost during COVID is the social interaction. And it's all relegated to screens. And we miss seeing people in person. And I'm excited seeing what Spatial is up to there and bringing holo presence there, which can simulate the actual presence in a better way, I think.
Yeah, anyone else? Do you want to chime in on this topic? You got a shy panel.
I think, yeah, so one of the things that was interesting to me that I struggle with a little bit as I hear about what people are trying to do is the idea of I want to replicate reality, right? As opposed to letting me be better in my reality. You know, like I kind of think of all the things in my reality that I don't enjoy in real life, you know, and, you know, the idea of any office worker being next to me at my home office at any point in time sounds like a nightmare more than it sounds like exactly what I want that enables me to be great at my job. And so I think as these platforms and things evolve, right, finding that balance, like how do we seamlessly put this into our daily lives will be kind of really interesting to see what that, you know, Jacob, your holo office life works like as you think about me in the context of my day and how that helps me be more productive. And you know, I think there is no clear answer right now on how these things are going to unfold. But, you know, I think it's really about how do we empower each of us to be, you know, better, right? And this technology is part of the background as opposed to the forefront. And, you know, you did a great job of mentioning a lot of the friction points that still bring the technology to the forefront today, right? Versus is moving it seamlessly in the background.
Claudia mentioned a couple of barriers. For each of your industries, what do you think the biggest barriers facing your products are right now? Are they technical? Are they adoption? If they are technical, what do you think the features in the next evolution of XR products need to be? What's the key feature that needs to be added?
I'll jump in on this one. You know, for specifically what we're building, I think it depends on which aspect you look at. So if you look at the sort of Zoom aspect, like we're trying to create really, really deep sense of presence, I would say the thing that we feel most limited by right now is probably technical. Like we don't have sensors on headsets that we could use to measure, you know, facial gestures and things like that. And so, you know, there's a limit to how expressive we can make our avatars as a result. If you look at the other side of the coin, maybe like more of the Slack side where we're talking about utility, people actually doing things together, most modern day collaboration apps are defined by convenience. And right now, the very fact that people are not wearing a headset all day means that an activation energy is required, right? And then the more, you know, uncomfortable the headset, the more steps it takes to get into the app, the more seconds a user has to basically comprehend a reason not to do it, right? And so the reason why there's so much money pouring into apps like Notion, these other things, is because they're always on. And they're always on the device that you're already using, right? And in a work context, it means to get someone to switch over to VR, there either has to be like an exceptionally good reason, which is really, really a high bar to meet, right? Like it has to be like, oh, I'm going to show the CEO of a company something. Or you want to take the bar down and be like, or it's so easy to put on the headset and just be in the experience that, you know, people are a lot more amenable to doing so. And so I think that experience of like, I can get into the experience, put on the headset, super easy, it's comfortable, and I'm in, is still the major barrier to entry on the utility side.
Bharani, Eddie, I'm curious for your use case. Is the biggest adoption what Jacob is saying, which is just getting people to adopt it, getting it on heads, or is it the technology itself?
I would say for the bridge program, the job training program I was describing earlier, it's both, but on the it's not really, the technical problems were more on the hardware side. So for instance, the Oculus 2 did not really operate that well in an outdoor setting because the sensors, from what we understand, were very sensitive to sunlight. And so as a result, there was no way to interface with the software. The controls kept on disappearing on users in the moment. So I'm hoping that's a barrier that will be overcome in the future, or that will be fixed in the future. I would say on the adoption side, I think the weight of the device itself probably makes it a surprising type of technology to use for first-time users, but also the pandemic has made generally delivery of this program very unique. So as you saw in that picture, we did it outdoors. We also had nonprofit staff from 3 other organizations, Mission Hiring Hall, APRI, and CYC, to help clean the headsets in between usage too. So it's incredibly labor intensive to also implement the programming as is. But my hope is it just gets easier over time as well as we hopefully emerge from the pandemic and just can share the headsets without having to worry about contagion. But Bharani, did you have other thoughts as well?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and what Jacob was saying about adoption, just people have to put it on. Usually what we've seen happen is once people try an experience, they like immediately, their mind just gets flooded with like 1,000 ideas, which I'm sure everyone on this call has experienced as well. And so that kicks off like a budgeting discussion. And so I think the other barrier is just a lot of organizations don't really know how to think about XR yet. They're like, wow, this is really amazing. How do I justify this? How do I talk to, the CFO or corporate finance or my boss or whatever, and actually make the business case for this? And so I think those are the two barriers, but like the positive thing that we've seen is once people try the experience, a lot of people just mentally commit and say like, I must have this, and then they kind of like figure out how to justify the budget afterwards.
And then I think maybe let's talk a little bit about timeline next. So talk about what you think the lasting legacy of 2020 and 2021 is going to be. In past events, I think it's easy to overstate what this is going to be when we look back on it. But it is a transformative period for XR. So, when we're looking back in retrospect in a couple of years, what is the legacy of this time period going to be for XR in your industries? Dan, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, 2020, I think you have to almost look at it a bit more in a larger technology context. It's not transformational just for XR. It's transformational for technology in general, right? I couldn't tell you the number of major Fortune 500 companies that the first months of the pandemic, we spent enabling their people with Microsoft Teams, right? Basic building blocks of virtual communication were missing at many, many, many companies. Right, I still have clients today that have Skype for Business because their computer workstations are so old they can't even run Microsoft Teams. And so when you think about 2020, right, it showed that the companies that had invested in ongoing technology innovation and enablement were able to respond much more rapidly to the pandemic than those that didn't make those investments. And so there was definitely a catch-up period that took place to get some basic building blocks in place. And we can see now with evolution to cloud computing, right? That's the next evolution of getting people kind of into the space in the clouds. And so what I'm excited by is as companies are now innovating, they're becoming much more nimble and flexible, right? Which I think what then allows us to take all the great innovations we've learning and done in the XR space and move them on top of those workloads so that as companies move to the cloud and they're not as tied down on their physical infrastructure, right, you can much more rapidly innovate and deploy these XR solutions seamlessly than you ever could a year ago, much less 6 months ago.
I'll share a perspective from the education space. I think 2020 has been transformational in one sense. You know, there's always been this kind of like raging debate about online learning, and you know, is it better, is it worse than like classroom learning or in-person learning? And you know, people now have like very strong opinion. I mean, they had strong opinions before, and I think now people are like definitively saying that like a purely online education is destructive in some cases, right? I mean, it's great for certain use cases where, for example, you've got like somebody who's already got a job and who's already working, and so like they don't have a choice but to do online learning. But for students who had the option of like going to a physical campus and now have been forced to do it online, especially like, you know, where hands-on skills are required. You can think healthcare, you know, Eddie's talked about construction. I mean, there are tons and tons of jobs that require hands-on skills, even learning a lab, like if you're chemistry or biology. For all those things, XR is going to play a huge role, right? Because doing it in a purely online Zoom type of setting, like just doesn't cut the mustard. So I do think that which specifically what's related to education, I mean, 2020 is going to be a trampoline. I mean, it's a milestone year for changes that are to come, that will impact, you know, decades to come. I'm sorry, one last thing I'll say about that is like not just the ideas, but like the money that was invested into building new learning. I mean, that's also further data. Important data that shows like this is happening. Like there is no turning back. We are moving into a high tech kind of learning type of world, and I think that's exciting. I think a lot more people would throw their hat in the ring and create really innovative experiences. I think the stuff that Jacob's doing is gonna be great for you know, like working, and then there's gonna be a whole different set of like experiences around learning as well.
I totally agree with what what you were saying there. I think it really opens up the space. XR will be used for some of those more practical interactions where we're able to deliver education to remote and rural communities, northern communities, in a much more effective way. Once we have, you know, solid infrastructure to have the hardware in place as well to those communities. And I think the challenge for us as sort of content creators and designers of these spaces is to think really creatively about what affordances does this technology give us that we can actually extend reality, that we're not just replicating it, but we're adding to it by using the three-dimensional space to display and store information and interactions and everything. That's something that I'm really excited about, and that this has really catapulted because we're seeing the limitations of just interacting with the Zoom screen, and we're seeing what could happen if we had a whole space around us that we could interact with. And then the question becomes, how do we design that space to actually help with the content that we're trying to deliver? And a lot of these questions are as of yet unanswered, and it's really exciting to think about that and then to test out what will work and in which context. It also means that we have to reinvent our physical spaces and our face-to-face interactions once they become possible again. So what is the value of coming together in person? What are the things that we're going to do there that we couldn't do in a virtual space? So I think there's a lot of creative thinking and evolution that's going to happen there.
Jacob, do you want to add anything, or I'll move to the next question?
I mean, I would echo what everyone said. I think, listen, we've just endured or continue to endure the largest work from home experiment ever forced upon mankind unexpectedly. It was kind of a very bizarre happening, right? And so our preferences and our traumas that relate to this experience will echo throughout the decade, right? And, you know, there's kind of a trope going around the internet right now that we'll have a new roaring 20s because people are so fed up with being cooped up that they're just going to party their faces off for the next 10 years. Do I know if that's true? I certainly don't, but like, I think people are trying to understand what the cultural reverberations are. I think one thing that's certain is that the idea of what, to echo Danielle, what we should do together and what we can do apart, our POV on that will have radically changed by the end of this, because I think I was reading a PwC report recently, and like most employees, interestingly, and I think their opinion may change over time, but most employees report that they're more productive during this time and have indicated a great preference for remote work, right? Now, over time, I think people will learn more and more about the lasting effects of what it means to work remotely. But right now, I think people have understood to some extent that there's a lot that's advantageous about it. And we've seen some of the biggest companies in the world already decide to lean into this, right? And say that it's okay to work from anywhere. So that means there will be a natural curiosity, far more than there's ever been, in tools that solve some of the core frictions of working remotely. Now, I think the thing is that we have such it's so funny, like there's such an impatience as an industry that you could see these problems trying to be solved in so many different ways, right? Like, to solve the problem of remote meetings right now, you have like the current generation of things like Zoom or Teams. You have these new generations of tools where you kind of like move little circles around 3D spaces, but on a 2D screen. You have things like Spatial that actually, want to put you there. And I think the question that's always hardest to answer is timing, right? Because you need a lot of things to align. You need market interest, you need pain points, you need infrastructure, you need cost, you need all these things to align. But my sense is that this moment was kind of blood in the water for big companies, recognizing that these unique affordances, as was just mentioned, actually do uniquely solve these problems that have been so augmented, so magnified from the situation that will so continue. And so I think that's the big story here, is like, yes, Facebook has been super interested in investing in the space, but I expect a rapid increase in investment to solve this problem of remote alienation, this division between people, over the next couple of years, because I think people now really, really smell the opportunity. If you had told someone in 2020, hey, would it be smart to build like a video chat app? They might say like, well, there's Zoom, like there's Skype, it's a very, very crowded market. But because there's a paradigm shift, I think people really sense opportunity. It's certainly what brought us into the space. And so I would expect that it'll just feel ridiculous, the number of companies that are, whether through education or for office work or whatever it is, that are going to be jumping into this, because it's become so obvious that we're about to experience a true revolution in how people learn and how people work.
I agree. That's why I love the Bill Gates quote, because he uses the word force, and it really was. We were forced as a world to take a jump, much faster than anyone wanted to, and a lot came out the other side because of that. All right, before we move to Q&A, and by the way, attendees, go ahead and post questions that you want answered at the end here. I have one other question. Let's look to the future, and I want everybody to take a risk and put a stake in the ground and make a prediction. So let's look 5 years from now, so relatively attainable. You're not too far in the distance. How widespread is XR going to be within your industry and your application? And try to tie a metric to it. What is the adoption? How many teachers are going to be using this? How many people are going to get trained through XR? How many people in the world are even going to own a VR headset? Something like that. But where are we going to be as a world for XR in 5 years? So this is for each of you. Take it away, somebody.
I'll just say a couple of sentences, and I'll be crazy if that's what you're asking for, Everett. I think in 5 years it's not unrealistic to see millions, let's say 5 million people who graduate high school and get a job that pays a middle-class wage without ever having gone to college, purely by learning using XR technologies and being connected directly with the companies that know what they want, and they're willing to share that information via training in XR with the people who are out there looking to learn new things to get those jobs. And I think it'll be the most profound in parts of the world where access to traditional education has largely been guarded. And so to use to build on your quote about force from Bill Gates, I mean, as the saying goes, necessity is the mother of all innovation. And I mean, there are world leaders right now who are constantly realizing, like, wow, there are massive limitations to educating the world with just online. We need something else, and XR is going to play a big role in helping fill that gap.
I'll go next if that's cool. I think I guess my anticipation is that I sort of sense like we're going to be like in that like iPhone 3, iPhone 4 moment in 5 years. Like if you play out what's going to happen on the VR side, right? It's like the fundamental problem that VR still needs to solve is like optics issues, and then being able to successfully offboard more compute so you can take graphics to the next level, I think. And so my sense is that within 5 years, we'll see both problems easily solved. And so you're going to have like a pretty unbelievable device that can be used for so many different things. And then, we'll be an AR glasses world by that point, right? Like this sort of, from what I can see from CS, is the year of the like very initial widely available smart glasses, but they're sort of more like the next generation of Google Glass. I think you probably are talking like a year or two after that, you're probably looking at like more advanced waveguide based glasses, but still somewhat limited because you want them to be wearable all day. They have to be light. So there's a battery limitation. But then a year or two after that, you start to see some of those problems unlocked. So, I sort of see like the middle of the decade as like the beginning moment when, we're talking about like true mass interest, where I could see basically like anyone interested in buying a phone, that type of person being interested in using these headsets. Whereas until that time, I think it's going to be, and I don't use niche in the pejorative sense. I don't mean niche as in small. I just mean niche meaning like very, very paired to like specific use cases. So people using this because they need to work, or people using this because they need to learn. Whereas within 5 years, I think that'll be the beginning of basically adopting it without necessarily a clear use case in mind beyond it being just a multi-purpose device. And I'll see that across both the VR and the AR spectrum. So call it, like in 5 years, I think you'll have something like, maybe you're going to reach like your first 100 million total users type of deal across both types of devices.
I think we need to think about Thomas Edison's quote here again, that irrational exuberance, like the world will be completely transformed within 10 years. It took about 100 years for Edison's quote to come true, for us to teach every aspect of human knowledge through a screen, maybe more than 100 years. So I think while the technology will be there, we're all early adopters, creators of this content. I think the change management for mass adoption of this is going to take a while. And I think, even with iPhone 3 and 4, we weren't there with this sort of global acceptance of that yet, right? And I think for this, the use cases need to be very clear to people. They need to see how they can connect. I think the reason that the iPhone went so quickly was texting people, being in touch with people really, really quickly, that social aspect again. And so I think as we continue to explore this space for real connection and doing things that we weren't able to do before, that's going to really push it forward. It's really hard to say where we're going to be at in 5 years or even in 10 years. I'm always really worried about giving predictions because I'm a real optimist. I want these things to happen really quickly. I can see the future, but I think the way we see it is not going to be the way most people will be there with us.
So I kind of quickly we'll wrap and say I think the future is going to be entirely dependent on how successful our friends on the panel in education can be. You know, I have a 11-year-old daughter, and we use VR. She went to her first concert, Chance the Rapper, you know, fist bumping people in other parts of the world at the concert. And she started to ask as we study, hey, can I go visit this place and see what that's like? And throughout the day, all the time, she says, this would be great in VR. I could do this in VR. And so I kind of see generationally, right, as kids start to use and experience that, they will demand that as they grow up into the corporate workplace because it will be intuitive and make sense. And so I think the future in 10 years, a lot of people could be using this, but we've got to figure out how to get it into the hands of, you know, the teens and the education that can learn, and then help us collectively figure out how to use that productively in our lives.
And I'll just go briefly too. I think of these things in terms of equity and how to expand the reach in as diverse communities as possible. And, you know, TRANSFR VR's app has been actually really good in the way it seemingly blends the VR instruction itself with as if it's an in-person training. So I've been very appreciative of that. I think the question remains as to how students using any particular type of virtual reality app or education course retain the information, and that's going to be interesting to track over the next few years. So for now, for the next 5 years, I see it being a blend of instruction, and it will require really targeted smart investments by philanthropy, by government, by private sector stakeholders.
Great. All right, we're running out of time. I've been going through the Q&A questions. There's a bunch of questions that are kind of logistical, so I'll just answer one or two of those. Yes, this recording is going to be available. It'll be on the VR AR Association San Francisco chapter YouTube. I'll send out the link to the whole mailing list after this. Lots of specific questions to the companies. I don't think we're going to be able to have time to get that, but I'll try to connect these people with each of you so you can follow up afterwards. One question I thought I'd highlight quickly, and I think we only have time for one, is from Ehsan, and it's very simple. How do you evaluate learning outcomes? And maybe in addition to that is, what can you evaluate with XR that you couldn't before? That's for anybody.
I could share a quick 30 seconds on how we evaluate learning outcomes. I mean, there is data collected in the experience, so we do measure it that way and we give people a score, but ultimately, once they're done with the XR experience, we see if they can do the task in real life. So using, you know, whatever it is, if they're using tools or machines or whatever, and they have to be able to perform those tasks unguided, unaided in real life. So that's hence the name of the company, TRANSFR VR. We're looking for knowledge transfer. We want to put them in front of unique, novel situations and see if what they learned in VR is going to help them translate to their tasks in real life.
Claudia, for your students, I'm curious, what's the most important metric for learning outcome measurement?
For our studies, what we did is we did a test afterwards to see what they had learned, and were able to compare the test scores like that. And one of the tests that we did in the first study was to actually have them identify brain areas on actual brain specimens. And we saw that those who had learned in the three-dimensional environment actually performed better on that. So that was a really interesting translation of learning in 3D and then finding it in the real world. So that was a really encouraging finding, actually. The big outcome is always, are the students better at what they were, what we were trying to teach them? We have a critical care simulation as well, where the students work collaboratively to take care of a critically ill patient, you know, that appears in their augmented reality environment. And it's really all about getting used to the sort of care algorithm, the steps that you go through, and practicing that over and over again. And then the outcome is, if we actually put them into a test environment, will they be able to go through that algorithm quickly and collaborate effectively?
All righty. I think with that, we're going to close it out. Thank you so much to all the speakers. Thank you to Joe, my co-host. Joe, feel free to put your webcam on and join us. all the tech staff behind the scenes, making sure Teams works and all the various issues. Thank you to the association for being a co-host here. If you are interested in learning more about the VR/AR Association, feel free to email me. I'm happy to talk to anyone regardless of location. And I think this was a really successful event. So speakers, thank you so much for joining. This was wonderful.
On behalf of Microsoft, I'd like to thank you too. You were absolutely awesome. Thank you very much. And it looks like we had a lot of good attendees and people that were very engaged. So that's great.
Good stuff.
Take care, everybody. Thank you very, very, very much.
Thanks so much. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.